I was 20 years old when the earth itself seemed to be chasing me. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the frantic drum of my heartbeat mixing with the pounding hooves behind me, the growl of dogs, the echo of men shouting my name into the dark. My feet bled as I ran, but I did not dare stop. If I stopped, I would be caught, bound, and returned to the fate chosen for me. And I could not bear that fate. I would rather let the coyotes pick my bones clean than be forced into the arms of the man they had promised me to. I had been told since I was a child that a daughter's duty was to strengthen her people. My father, proud and unbending, believed alliances mattered more than a daughter's breath. When the trader came, the white man with the fat hands and cruel smile, he brought rifles, tobacco, and a barrel of whiskey. My father gave him me. They did not even speak my name when they struck the bargain. To them, I was only a body, a price, a promise. That night, beneath the thin moon, I refused to be anyone's bargain. The forest was my only ally. I knew its paths as I knew the lines of my own palm. The scent of sagebrush and pine sap filled my nostrils as I darted between shadows, trying to lose the hunters. The hem of my buckskin dress tore on thorns, branches whipped my arms. My breath came ragged, clouds of steam in the cold night air. Behind me, I heard the heavy-voiced men, my own uncles among them, spurring horses to follow me. They will break me, I thought. They will tie me like a captured deer, and when morning comes, I will stand before the fire as a bride unwilling. But I had the blood of my mother in me, her stubbornness, her quiet fire. I clutched the pouch of beads she had left me before her death, a small talisman at my neck. Every step I took was for her, for the memory of the song she once sang while braiding my hair. She had been given away at 16, and her eyes never lost their sadness. I swore that night I would not let the same sorrow steal my life. The ground grew uneven. Rocks tore at the soles of my moccasins until they split. I stumbled, caught myself, and ran again. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, but I kept moving. Coyotes howled far off, a mournful chorus that seemed to echo my desperation. And then silence. The men's voices faded behind me, lost in the thickening forest. The dogs no longer barked. Only my own breathing, harsh and shallow, filled the night. I slowed, stumbling into a small clearing where moonlight fell silver across the grass. My knees buckled, but I forced myself onward. I knew better than to believe I was safe. They could be circling. They could be waiting. I pressed forward, deeper into the unknown. Hours seemed to pass. My body moved without strength, my will dragging it forward. I began to wonder if I would die in those woods, a runaway ghost never spoken of again. Perhaps that was better than the life they had planned. Better than lying beside a man whose touch made my skin crawl, whose laughter reeked of smoke and greed. I whispered a prayer in Apache, words my mother had taught me. For protection, for freedom, for the courage of the hawk. My voice was hoarse, little more than a broken breath, but the forest seemed to listen. And then, through the trees, I saw it. A faint glow. Firelight. At first, I thought it was a trick, my mind conjuring safety where none existed. But as I crept closer, the glow grew stronger. The scent of wood smoke touched my nose, warm and earthy. My heart leapt and stumbled at once. Fire could mean refuge, or it could mean danger. Perhaps it was the camp of my pursuers. Perhaps it was the traitor himself, waiting to claim me. But I had nothing left. My legs shook, my throat ached, my blood left dark stains on the forest floor. If I stayed in the trees, I would collapse. If I went toward the fire, I might yet find mercy. The choice was no choice at all. I staggered through the undergrowth until the trees thinned, revealing a small cabin crouched beside a stream. Its logs gleamed in the moonlight, smoke curling from the chimney. I had never seen this place before. It was no Apache dwelling, no trader's post. It was something different, something solitary. A horse stamped near the fence, lifting its head as I approached. My heart clenched with fear. I tried to speak, but my lips cracked, no sound emerging. I stumbled to the door, lifted a trembling hand, and knocked once. The door opened. A man stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, his hair shadowed dark in the firelight behind him. His eyes met mine, not cold like the trader's, not calculating like my father's. They were wary, yes, but steady, a kind of quiet strength I had never seen before. I tried to speak again, to tell him who I was, but my body betrayed me. Darkness swam across my vision, and my knees gave way. The last thing I felt was his arms catching me before the ground rose up, his voice rough with surprise, saying words I could not understand. Then, nothing. Only blackness, heavy and deep. That was the night I ran. The night my old life died and another began, though I did not yet know it. When I awoke, the first thing I saw was firelight. It glowed soft and steady, painting the wooden walls around me in shades of amber. For a moment, I thought I had passed into the spirit world. My body felt weightless, my head heavy, and every sound came muffled, as if carried through water. Then I shifted, and pain shot through my legs and arms raw, aching, real. No, I was still alive. I lay on a rough bed of pelts. Bear, maybe, or deer. The cabin was small but sturdy, its logs sealed with clay. Shadows flickered across shelves lined with tools, jars, a rifle leaning against the far wall. A kettle hissed over the hearth. The smell of broth rich and savory hung in the air, making my empty stomach twist. And then I saw him, the man who had opened the door the night before. He sat in a chair near the fire, one hand resting on his knee, the other holding a small knife as he whittled a piece of wood. His movements were steady, unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world. His hair was brown touched with gold, his beard untrimmed but not wild. His shirt was plain, sleeves rolled to his elbows, the fabric worn thin. When his eyes lifted and met mine, I froze. I expected hostility, or greed, or at least curiosity sharp enough to cut. Instead, I found only calm. He studied me the way a man studies a storm cloud on the horizon, aware of its danger, but unwilling to turn away. "You're awake," he said. His voice was deep, roughened by the cold air and perhaps silence. He spoke in English, not Apache. I swallowed hard, my throat raw. My first instinct was silence. Silence had always been my shield. But the weight of his gaze pressed me into answering, even if my words came cracked and broken. "Yes," I whispered. He nodded, as if I had confirmed something he already knew. Then he set down the wood and knife, stood, and poured a small cup from the kettle. He brought it to me, holding it out with a kind of cautious respect. "Drink. It'll help." I hesitated. My people had taught me never to accept food or drink from strangers. But my lips were split, my stomach clawed at itself, and the steam carried the promise of warmth. I took the cup with trembling hands, sipping carefully. The broth slid down my throat like liquid fire, chasing the cold from my bones. "Thank you," I managed. His mouth twitched, not a smile, but something close. He pulled the chair nearer to the bed, sitting again. For a long moment, he said nothing, and neither did I. The fire popped, the kettle sighed, and outside the wind rattled branches against the roof. Finally, he asked, "What happened to you?" The question struck like an arrow. My chest tightened. Should I tell him? That I had run from my people? That they would come looking for me, and anyone who sheltered me would risk their wrath? If I spoke the truth, he might throw me out. If I lied, perhaps I could stay long enough to regain my strength. I lowered my eyes to the cup. I was running. He waited, as though expecting more. When none came, he only nodded again, as if my answer was enough. His quiet unsettled me. I had known many men, traders, warriors, chiefs. All of them filled silence with boasts, threats, or commands. But this man seemed content to let silence breathe between us. It was almost gentle. After some time, he rose, fetched a folded blanket from a shelf, and placed it over me with careful hands. His touch never lingered, but I still stiffened, the old fear rising sharp in my chest. He noticed I could see it in the way his hand paused, but he said nothing, only stepped back to the fire. I wanted to ask his name, but the words stuck. Pride, suspicion, fear, too many thorns tangled my tongue. Instead, I studied him when he turned away. His shoulders bore the weight of labor, his hands were scarred, but his movements were precise. This was no careless wanderer. He was a man who had built his own shelter, who had chosen solitude. Why? As the hours passed, warmth seeped into my body, but unease did not leave me. My mind whispered, "You cannot stay. You must leave before dawn. They will find you here, and he will suffer for it." I clenched the beads at my neck, my mother's gift. I could almost hear her voice. "Choose wisely, daughter. Every path has its price." That night, as I lay wrapped in the blanket, staring at the firelight dancing across the ceiling, I promised myself this. I would rest, recover, and then vanish before I could bring ruin to this stranger's quiet world. But deep inside, a softer voice stirred one I tried to ignore. It asked whether, just maybe, the fire in this cabin could burn away the shadows that had always followed me. I turned on my side, closing my eyes against the thought. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow, I will leave. Yet even as sleep claimed me again, I knew I was lying. The morning light came sharp and cold through the cracks in the cabin walls. I woke to the smell of smoke and iron, the faint clatter of metal against wood. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then the memory of last night returned: the firelight, the stranger, the broth warm in my hands. He was already awake. I heard him moving outside, boots crunching over frost, the low murmur of a horse snorting in response. My people had taught me to rise with the sun, yet exhaustion pinned me to the bed. When I finally pushed myself up, every muscle complained. My feet, torn from the flight through the forest, throbbed against the fur bedding. On a small table near the fire sat a wooden bowl, half filled with bread and dried meat. My suspicion sharpened. Why leave food for me? What did he want in return? Among my people, nothing was ever free, not food, not shelter, not favors. Still, hunger gnawed at me. I tore a piece of bread, chewing slowly. It was coarse, dry, but it filled the emptiness inside. The door creaked open. He stepped in, carrying a pail of water that sloshed with each stride. His eyes flicked to me, then to the bowl, as if to check whether I had eaten. "You're awake," he said, the same words as the night before. I set the bread down, straightening my back. "Yes." He nodded once, placed the pail by the hearth, and began tending the fire. No questions, no sharp glances, no effort to pry into my past. His silence pressed heavier than words. Finally, I asked, "Why are you helping me?" He paused, poker in hand. For a long while, he did not answer. Then he said, simply, "Because you needed it." The words left me unsettled. Kindness? Without reason? It did not fit with what I knew of the world. Among my people, mercy was rare. Among whites, rarer still. The next days unfolded like that. Quiet, steady, filled with tasks I only half understood. He rose early to split wood, feed the horse, and haul water from the creek. Sometimes he returned with game slung over his shoulder, sometimes with nothing but the weariness of a man who had walked miles. I watched more than I spoke. When I tried to help, he neither welcomed nor refused me. Once, I limped outside and gathered kindling. My hands, used to weaving and grinding maize, fumbled with the axe, and I cursed under my breath. He came beside me, taking the handle gently. "Here," he said, showing me how to set the blade, how to use my weight rather than my strength. His hands brushed mine only briefly, but the touch burned hotter than the fire in the hearth. I pulled back quickly, clutching my beads. He stepped away without a word, letting me try again. At night, I lay awake listening. The wind through the pines sounded different from the drums of my people. The creak of the cabin timbers replaced the chants of the lodge. Loneliness pressed down on me, heavier than the furs across my shoulders. Yet there was something here I had never known among my own. Quiet that did not demand, silence that did not judge. Still, I told myself each night, tomorrow, I will go. But tomorrow came, and I stayed. I told myself it was only until my feet healed, only until I regained strength, only until I knew the land better, so I could avoid those who might search for me. Yet, as the days lengthened, I began to notice smaller things. The way he hummed low under his breath when sharpening his knife. The care he showed his horse, brushing its coat with long strokes as if it were a brother rather than a beast. The patience with which he repaired his tools, never cursing when they broke, only mending. I remembered the men of my tribe, proud, fierce, voices raised like thunder. They commanded, they demanded, they filled the air with themselves. This man did not. He moved as if the world was heavy enough already, and he would not add his own weight to it. One evening, as we sat by the fire, I dared to ask, "What is your name?" He glanced at me, surprised. "Asa," he said. The word felt strange on my tongue, yet solid, like stone. "And you?" he asked. For a heartbeat, I hesitated. My name was my identity, my spirit. To give it was to open a door. But what harm could it do, here in this lonely cabin? "Naomi," I whispered. His eyes softened, only slightly. He nodded, as if storing the word carefully away. He did not repeat it, did not claim it. That small respect unsettled me more than if he had spoken it aloud. The fire crackled between us. I should have told him then. I would be leaving soon. But the words refused to rise. Instead, I sat watching the flames, my beads clutched in my palm, my heart caught between flight and something I dared not name. That night, before sleep, I whispered to myself, one more day, just one more day. But deep inside, I already knew I was lying. The first sign came with the sound of hooves. I was outside, gathering water from the creek, when the rhythm of iron striking earth reached my ears. My blood ran cold, horses, two of them, coming fast. For a moment, I froze like a deer, the pail trembling in my hands. Then I set it down and ran back toward the cabin. Asa had already heard. He stood in the doorway, rifle slung casually across his arm, though I noticed the tension in his jaw. His eyes flicked to me sharp, questioning, but I had no words. My breath came too fast. The riders appeared through the trees, shadows becoming men. I knew them at once. One was a trader, a man who had often brought whiskey and rifles to the edge of my people's camp. The other was one of our scouts, tall, lean, his braids swinging with each stride of his horse. My stomach twisted. They reined in a few yards from the cabin. Dust swirled around their boots as they dismounted. "Asa Zeller," the trader called, voice oily with false cheer. "Didn't think I'd find you holed up here." Asa's face remained unreadable. "You found me." The scout's eyes slid past him to me. Recognition flared. "Naomi," he said in our tongue, low but sharp. "You should not be here." The name struck me like a lash. It had been days since I had heard it spoken in the language of my people. The sound filled me with both longing and dread. "I don't belong there anymore," I whispered back, but the words shook. The trader laughed, misunderstanding. "She's the one, ain't she? The Apache girl who ran off from a fine arrangement. Do you know what she's worth? Zeller? Men would pay dearly to have her brought back." My heart slammed against my ribs. Worth. That was all I had been to them in exchange, a bargain. Asa shifted, stepping slightly in front of me. His rifle still rested easy in his arms, but I noticed how his thumb hovered close to the hammer. "She's not yours," he said quietly. The trader sneered. "She ain't yours either. She belongs to her people, or to the man who paid for her." The scout nodded grimly. His gaze held mine. "You dishonor your blood by hiding here. Come back. Don't make us drag you." The forest seemed to hold its breath. I felt small again, powerless, the same girl who had fled under moonlight with her feet bleeding. My mouth opened, but no sound came. Then Asa spoke, voice steady as stone. "She stays." The trader's laugh cracked sharp. "You're gonna make enemies you don't want. Zeller, this ain't your fight." Asa's eyes didn't waver. "It is now." Everything happened too quickly after that. The trader's hand dropped to the revolver at his belt. The scout took a step toward me, reaching as if to grab my arm. The crack of Asa's rifle split the air. The trader froze, eyes wide, his pistol half drawn. A puff of dust rose at his boots where the bullet struck ground. "Next one goes higher," Asa said, calm as the winter sky. The trader hesitated, then slowly raised his hands. The scout's gaze burned into me. Anger, disappointment, betrayal, all tangled. "Naomi," he said again, voice raw. "Do you truly choose this?" I swallowed hard. My legs shook, but I forced myself to stand taller. I choose freedom, I whispered. His face hardened like carved wood. Without another word, he mounted his horse. The trader cursed, dust flying as he scrambled back to his saddle. Within moments, they were gone, their hoofbeats fading into the trees. Silence fell heavy around us. I realized my hands were trembling. Asa lowered the rifle, exhaled slow, and set it against the wall. I stared at him, heart pounding. You didn't have to. Yes, I did, he interrupted softly. His gaze met mine, steady and unflinching. They would have taken you. End quote. The truth of it sank deep. If not for him, I might already be bound, carried back to a fate I had fled with blood and desperation. Something inside me shifted then. For weeks, I had seen myself only as a fugitive, a runaway girl hiding in borrowed safety. But standing there, with the smell of gunpowder still sharp in the air, I understood. I was no longer only running from. I was choosing where and with whom to stand. That night, as the fire burned low, I sat in silence, replaying the scout's words. Do you truly choose this? Yes, I did. For the first time, I felt the weight of choice settle on my shoulders, not as a burden, but as a kind of armor. I was not just Naomi the runaway anymore. I was Naomi the chooser, and I had chosen to stay. In the days that followed the confrontation, silence clung to the cabin like smoke. I woke each morning expecting hooves in the distance, voices calling my name, hands dragging me back. Yet no one came. Only the forest breathed around us, wind in the pines, water rushing over stone, the cries of hawks overhead. Asa never spoke of that day. He simply carried on, chopping wood, tending to the horses, mending tools. But something had shifted between us. Each time I looked at him, I saw the moment he had stood between me and danger, his rifle steady, his voice unwavering. It lingered in my mind like a flame refusing to die. I began to help more around the cabin. At first, small things, fetching water, gathering kindling, sweeping the floor. But soon Asa set a spade in my hands, guided me to the patch of soil behind the cabin. Earth's good here, he said, pressing his fingers into the dark dirt. We'll plant come spring. I knelt beside him, the cool soil sifting through my palms. My people had always known how to coax life from the land, yet this felt different. Not communal fields for a tribe, but a small plot for two people alone in the wilderness. A beginning. We worked side by side, loosening the soil, pulling stones. Once, when I stumbled, Asa caught my arm. His hand lingered longer than it needed to. My heart stumbled too. At night, I lay awake on the narrow bed, staring at the cabin ceiling. My thoughts drifted to my mother. She had worn a necklace of turquoise beads, each one passed from her mother before her. I carried a small token, still a strip of deerskin etched with patterns of my clan. I would hold it in the dark, pressing it to my lips. Am I betraying you? I would whisper to the memory of her. Or am I carrying you forward, into a life you never dreamed? The days grew longer. Snow melted into streams that raced through the forest. Together, we mended fences, built a rough shelter for the horses. Asa showed me how to hold a rifle, how to steady my breath, how to squeeze the trigger instead of pulling it. The first time I struck a tin can from 20 paces, he smiled not wide, but soft, like dawn breaking over the horizon. Good, he said. You're learning fast. Pride swelled in me, sharp and sweet. No man had ever praised me like that, not for beauty, not for obedience, but for strength. One evening, as the sun bled crimson through the trees, I carried water to the cabin. My arms trembled with the weight of the pail. Asa appeared at the door, reached for it. Our fingers brushed. My breath caught, though neither of us moved away. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single touch, the warmth of his hand against mine. He cleared his throat, took the pail, and stepped aside. But something unspoken lingered in the air between us. The first wildflowers appeared soon after. I found them one morning near the creek, yellow blossoms pushing through stubborn earth. I plucked a few and set them in a jar on the windowsill. The cabin, so rough and plain, seemed suddenly alive. Asa noticed them that evening. His gaze rested on the flowers, then on me. He said nothing, but his eyes spoke volumes. Weeks passed. My fear of being hunted began to ease, replaced by a different unease, one that stirred inside me whenever Asa's shadow brushed mine, whenever his voice softened as he spoke my name. One night, after supper, we sat by the fire. The crackle of flames filled the silence. Asa turned the tin cup in his hands, staring into the embers. Finally, he spoke. "I've lived alone a long time," he said. "Too long, maybe. This place, it wasn't meant to be just mine." I waited, heart drumming. He looked at me then, his eyes steady, unflinching. "I want you to stay, Naomi. Not because you've nowhere else to go. Not because you're running, but because you choose to." My throat tightened. "Stay. As what?" His answer came quiet, but sure. "As my wife." The fire popped, sending sparks upward. I sat frozen, the words hanging in the air like smoke. Wife. The very word that once chained me now sounded different, softer, fuller, carrying the weight of freedom instead of chains. I thought of the scout's voice. "Do you truly choose this?" Yes. Yes, I did. I reached for the strip of deerskin at my neck, held it between us. "If I stay, I bring all of me," I whispered. "My people, my past, my scars." Asa nodded once. "Then bring them. I want all of you." The firelight carved his features into shadow and flame. I felt the ground steady beneath me in a way it never had before. Slowly, I nodded. "I will stay." His hand found mine, warm and firm. And in that moment, I felt the first true seed of freedom take root in my chest. Not the wild freedom of flight, but the steady freedom of choosing to plant myself beside another soul. I was no longer only the girl who had run. I was the woman who had decided where to stand. The day we promised ourselves to each other came without ceremony, without witnesses save for the wind and the whispering trees. I had always imagined marriage as a binding chain, a bargain struck by men who never cared for a woman's heart. But when I stood beneath the open sky, with Asa's hand wrapped around mine, it felt nothing like bondage. There was no priest, no feast, no gathering. Only the meadow, alive with the hum of bees and the sway of tall grass, and the man before me. He looked at me with a steadiness that quieted every fear inside me. "I have nothing fancy to give you," he said. "No gold, no ring. Just this life, this land, and my word." I touched the strip of deerskin at my throat, the last remnant of my people. "Then I give you this," I said, pressing it into his palm. "Not as a leaving behind, but as a carrying forward." He closed his hand around it, solemn as if he held a sacred flame. Then he leaned down and kissed me, gentle at first, like the brush of leaves against skin, then deeper, as though he were sealing a promise written in our very bones. So we became husband and wife, not by law or tribe, but by choice. And in that choice, I felt more bound than any chain could hold me, and yet freer than I had ever been. The weeks that followed carried us swiftly toward winter. The air thinned, nights grew long, and frost rimed the windows of the cabin each morning. Together, we gathered firewood until our backs ached, stacked it high against the wall. We hunted deer and rabbit, salted meat, dried strips of venison to last the months of snow. I learned to patch clothes from scraps of hide, my fingers clumsy at first, then sure. Asa showed me how to repair a roof shingle, how to sharpen an axe. Side by side, we stitched survival into every day. There were nights we fell into bed too weary to speak, our hands raw and blistered. Yet even then, I found comfort in the weight of his arm across me, in the steady rise and fall of his chest. I had known loneliness even among my own people. With Asa, I discovered the strange peace of belonging. Then winter came in full, sweeping down like a beast from the mountains. Snow swallowed the world, piling against the cabin door, burying the fields we had cleared. The forest grew silent, as though the earth itself held its breath. We rationed food carefully, but hunger gnawed at us. There were days when all we had was thin broth, and nights when my stomach growled so loud it woke me. Still, Asa always handed me the larger portion, pretending not to notice when I tried to push it back toward him. One bitter night, I woke shivering. Fever burned through me, my skin slick with sweat though the air was ice. I remember gasping for breath, the world tilting. Asa's face hovered above me, lined with worry, his hand cool against my brow. "Stay with me, Naomi," he murmured, voice hoarse. "Please." Ugh. He fed me spoonfuls of broth, wiped my face with a damp cloth, kept the fire roaring even as his own eyes grew hollow from sleeplessness. Through the haze of sickness, I felt his hand gripping mine, steady, unyielding. It was that grip, that stubborn faith, that pulled me back from the edge. When the fever finally broke, he collapsed beside me, his head against my shoulder. I stroked his hair with trembling fingers, tears pricking my eyes. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to be cared for, not as a daughter to be bartered, not as a burden to be borne, but as a woman whose life mattered to someone else. By the time spring thawed the snow, I was stronger, and so was our bond. We had endured hunger, sickness, and cold. Yet instead of breaking us, winter had fused us together. We walked the land, surveying the damage, planning for the planting season. I could already picture rows of corn, beans climbing poles, squash spreading wide. I dreamed of baskets filled with harvest, of laughter echoing in the fields. More than once, I found myself wondering what it would be like to cradle a child in my arms, a child who carried both my people's blood and his. The thought frightened me, but it also filled me with a hope so fierce it ached. One evening, as we sat by the door watching the last snow melt into the earth, Asa spoke softly. "One day, Naomi, this place could be more than a cabin in the woods. It could be a home, for us and for whoever comes after." I leaned against his shoulder, my heart swelling. "Yes," I whispered, "a home." And in that moment, I believed it. I believed that a girl once hunted, once voiceless, could carve out a life with her own hands. I believed that love, quiet and steadfast, could be the foundation of something lasting. I had run once, desperate to escape the chains of others' choices. Now, I was building brick by brick, breath by breath, a life of my own choosing. I was 20 years old when I first felt the stir of new life within me. At first, it was only a whisper in my body, a faint quickening, like a bird brushing against the inside of its cage. But as the days passed, the truth grew undeniable. I carried within me a child, born of love, not of bargain. When I pressed Asa's hand against my belly, his eyes widened, then softened with awe. He kissed me then, so gently I nearly wept. "Naomi," he said, voice trembling, "we are no longer just two. We are a beginning." For so long I had lived as though beginnings were not mine to claim. I was the girl meant to be traded, silenced, forgotten. But standing on the threshold of motherhood, I realized that my story had never ended with escape. It had only begun when I chose my own path. That spring, the land itself seemed to share in our hope. Green shoots pushed through the thawing soil, rivers swelled with snowmelt, and the sky stretched vast and blue above us. Together, Asa and I planted corn, beans, and squash, my hands sinking into the rich earth. Each seed I placed felt like a promise to the child within me, to the life we were building, to the generations yet to come. At night, lying beside the fire, I would imagine the cabin filled with laughter. I pictured a small boy with Asa's quiet eyes, or a girl with my mother's dark hair and proud stance. I imagined teaching them the old songs of my people, the words in my mother's tongue, even as Asa taught them the ways of his world. Perhaps they would never belong fully to one side or the other, but perhaps, in that in-between, they would find a strength greater than either alone. I often thought of my mother during those days. I wondered if she had dreamed such dreams when she carried me in her womb, or if she had known only the weight of sorrow. She had not lived to see me grown, yet I carried her spirit in every step I took. I whispered to her sometimes, when I walked the edge of the woods, "I am free, Mama, not because the world gave it to me, but because I claimed it. Your daughter is no one's slave, no one's bargain." And the wind would stir through the pines, and I liked to believe it was her answer. One evening, as the sun bled crimson across the horizon, Asa and I sat together in silence. His arm circled my shoulders, his hand resting lightly against the curve of my belly. I felt the child flutter inside me, small but certain. "Do you ever wonder," I asked, "what our child will face in this world? half Apache, half white. Will they be welcomed anywhere? Asa was quiet a long moment before he replied. Maybe they will face both prejudice and loneliness, but they will also carry both worlds in their veins. And they will know, without doubt, that they were born from love, not fear. His words sank deep into me, warming places I had thought forever cold. When I turned 20, I realized something I had not understood at 15, nor even at 18, when I ran through the forest with bloodied feet. Freedom is not a gift, nor a place, nor a set of open doors. Freedom is the fire inside you that refuses to die, no matter how many hands try to smother it. I had carried that fire through nights of hunger, through sickness and cold, through fear of pursuit. And now, in the warmth of our cabin, in the steady devotion of the man beside me, I saw what freedom could become. Not just survival, not just escape, but creation. Freedom had given me love, and love had given me a future. Sometimes I still wake in the night, the old dreams clinging to me, the sound of dogs on my trail, the shadow of men riding hard behind me. I wake with my heart racing, the taste of fear sharp in my mouth. But then I hear Asa slow, even breathing beside me. I feel the small stir of life within me, and I know the chase is over. I am no longer the hunted. I am the home. So when I say, when I was 20, I do not speak only of age. I speak of a moment in time when everything changed. At 20, I learned that chains can be broken, not only by running, but by choosing. At 20, I learned that a woman's worth is not measured by what others demand of her, but by the life she claims for herself. At 20, I learned that love, once found, is not weakness but strength, the kind that can weather storms, hunger, and the coldest of winters. And at 20, I carried within me proof that the past need not dictate the future. A child of two worlds, a child of hope. Now, as I write these words in the quiet of another dawn, I place my hand over the curve of my belly and smile. I was 20 years old when I stopped running. I was 20 years old when I began to live.